as said, Mike's going to tell us more about his depot hack. Over to you, Mike. Wat jy vir ons sal aangaan dan. Dankie, Mike.
Dankie, Kobus. Okay, just for those that don't know me or don't remember me, I'm Mike Alexander, I live in George. I have a 1921 runabout, which I've had for many years, a left-hand drive. So over the years, I've learned a lot of things via friends about Model T Fords. And I've never had a veteran car. I've got lots of, well, not lots, but I've got a number of 20s cars and a number of 30s cars, but I've never had a veteran. And I never really thought I'd get the chance to have a veteran, let alone a brass T. Model T Ford has always been, for me, the ultimate old car. I drove the one that I have. I drove it when it didn't belong to me for somebody, and I delivered it down from George to Grootbroek. And I had a 5-minute lesson how to drive a Model T, and I hit the road. And of course, immediately I was hooked. Model Ts are just totally different, as we all know, from any other car. And it absolutely epitomizes an old car for me. So Model T is the ultimate as far as I'm concerned. And to have a brass T would just be absolutely wonderful. And out of the blue, at the beginning of last year, I happened to see on, I think it was Facebook Marketplace or something like that, one of these platforms, I happened to see a depot hack that was advertised, and I quickly got onto the guy who was up in Randburg, and he said, yeah, it's for sale and so on. And I said, well, I'm interested. The main reason why I'm interested is I always like things that are a little bit different. And the fact that this was like largely wood made a big difference to me. I'm not very good with steelwork, and I'm not that good with woodwork either, but at least woodwork, you know, it's sort of semi-doable for the average person. So I thought, well, you know, this might be a wonderful project. And when I contacted him, he said, well, yeah, he's actually got second thoughts about it because it was his father's car, and he thinks he's going to restore it himself. So I said, well, wonderful, that's absolutely great. You know, contact me if you have any needs for anything. And I suggested that he join the club and networked with members of the club, you know, to make the restoration doable, because he knew nothing. And he said, yeah, thanks very much. And then out of the blue, a year later, he phoned me. I said, well, if you ever change your mind, just let me know, because I'd still be interested. And out of the blue, at the end of last year, beginning of December, he phoned me and said, oh, well, a whole year's gone by and he hasn't done anything. So it's not likely he's going to do anything. Am I still interested? And I said, well, obviously I'm interested. And then by a series of events, I ended up managing to own this car. It had belonged to his father, and his father, he doesn't know how to drive it. His father didn't know how to drive it, but his father had got the car as a package. He was a wheeler-dealer guy, apparently, and he got it as a package in some deal or other. And it had stood for many, many, many years in a shed, and that's where it was still standing. So I said, yeah, well, I'm definitely interested, and so the process started. So I must just tell you that if it wasn't for my networking and friends in the Model T club, this wouldn't have been possible. Even the presentation wouldn't have been possible. So I'm very thankful specifically to Philip Brosser, but also to Philip Kushka for making this presentation possible, because I'm definitely very challenged when it comes to things technological, and they made it possible for me to present this sort of slideshow. So thank you very much, Philip and Philip. So the guy sent me some pictures as to what this car looked like. It had stood in this barn for many, many years. It seemed sort of fairly reasonable on first appearance. Most of the things that I was looking for tended to be there. Most of the things tended to be 1915-ish. There were some things that were different. My professionals that live in George with me told me that this is wrong and that's wrong and the following thing's wrong. Didn't worry me too much. And these were the pictures that I got initially of what the car looked like. The thing that I found out about this process is that, and I think it's like that with everything in the world, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And fortunately for me, I'm in George. Fortunate for me, I have a good friend of mine that lives in Pretoria in the form of Emil. And Emil volunteered to go and have a look at this car for me. Well, he didn't volunteer, he kind of got pushed into it. So he went and looked at this car for me and came back with some feedback. This was initially, this was at the beginning of last year. And then when I ended up buying the car, he kind of got elbowed into going to fetch the car from me because I couldn't fetch it at that point in time. And he said, no problem at all. He'll just take his trailer and load it up and he'll take it home and he'll keep it for me until I can fetch it. These are the sort of friends that one forms in this club. So Emil loaded up the car, that's loaded onto his trailer, and he took it home and he kept it for me until I could go and fetch it. On closer examination, it seemed that the woodwork didn't seem too bad. The seats didn't seem too bad. There were little gems that were found along the way. Emil found this brass mirror underneath the back seat, which was a bargain. I mean, I hadn't bargained that there was a mirror, but fortunately he found the rearview mirror, which I was very happy about. The underside of the car, you can see it's been standing on trestles and blocks, and it stood there for, I think, at least since 1986, but who knows how many years. It was seriously dirty, and the firewall area didn't seem all that great. And I kind of expected that if I took off this thick body putty and paint, I thought that, you know, the metalwork is going to need some serious attention. So I was a little bit worried about that. The inside seemed to be okay. There was a coil box, which I was very happy about. And, you know, the necessary seemed to be there. Some of the lights were there. Well, the lights were all there. Some of the lenses were there. And in general, it seemed like, you know, something doable. I drove up to Pretoria and fetched it from Emil, brought it back to George. And that was the first time that I saw the car in real life and that I really had a chance to look at it. So that's just on the trailer after I got back to George. First thing I did was I let down the little curtains that were all the way around. And I was quite amazed. There were some wasp nests and mud and filth and stuff in the rolls of the curtains because they hadn't been let down for many, many years. But in general, the roll-down curtains seem to be in fairly good nick. So I just cleaned them up, and they're certainly usable as they are. And so the process began. I took off the brass lights, the trimmings, and the park lights and so on. I took them off, sent them away to Durban to get them brass plated again. They were brass plated. And so the process started. So this is just what it looked like when I started taking it apart. Took the fenders off, took the body off. I was amazed at how heavy that wooden body was. It's solid wood. The sides of the car are just thin ply, but the rest is really solid wood. So that's a big chunk of wood lying there, and it was really, really heavy. Nonetheless, it came off, and eventually all the other bits came off, and we ended up just with the chassis and the engine and the petrol tank. I thought I'd just evaluate the whole thing before I go further. I didn't want to strip everything 100%. I wanted to just sort of do what absolutely needed to be done. Firewall wood was absolutely rotten. There were some interesting little plaques that I found, that being one of them, just a little, it wasn't filled in, but it was a little and plaque saying who the car belonged to and the make and the year and so on. Not a big deal to make a new firewall out of ply. and at least I had the template. Much the same with the steering system. I cleaned it up a little bit. All the brass, of course, didn't even look like brass when I got the car. And with a little bit of elbow grease, it started looking shiny again. The steering system I took apart. Steering wheel I just cleaned up a little bit, and a little bit of sanding on the woodwork, and a couple of coats of woodrock. And I like the slightly darker color that it came out as. So it's not immaculate, and it's certainly not a concourse type situation, but it looks quite nice, and it certainly looks a million times better than what it was. That's just the steering wheel again. I then mounted the steering system back onto the car, made a new ply firewall, so that I could just get everything working, or at least the essentials as far as the controls go, working again. The engine itself I haven't done anything to as yet. The spark plugs are seriously rusted in. As you can see, it's got quite an interesting fan belt, but it's got, there's a better shot of a distributor. So the coils have been removed. I was hoping to find the coils in the coil box, but alas, that wasn't the case. It was just an empty coil box. However, this distributor fortunately seems to be a type of an add-on type of accessory. So it doesn't look like they've sort of mutilated the cam too much to get it all. This all just sort of clips in. So I thought for the time being, I'm going to leave it just as it is. I can always change it to coils at a later date if I wish. But at this point in time, I only have 2 spare coils, so I need to purchase another 2. So for the time being, I thought I'd just run it on the distributor. The firewall area, or the surround, I was pleasantly surprised that when I took the paint and body putty off, it was actually fairly good steel. It had the right shape. I thought it would be all dented and seriously rusted, but fortunately that wasn't the case. So I used one of these paint stripping wheels on a drill, and I cleaned it all up as far as the firewall goes. There you can just see as well that where the pieces were starting to chip off, not looking so good at that point in time. I took off the fenders, well, all the rest of the steel, the running boards, the splash aprons, and the fenders, and I had them sandblasted. I first of all tried to do them with the paint stripping drill by my, one at a time, myself. But it took a whole day just to do half of one fender, and I was too impatient. So I took it to a local place, and they sandblasted them for me. I then ground them down with the same wheel to make them smooth again. And then I primed them with the edge primer, just with a brush. To my amazement, most of the steel, well, 99% of the steel work was actually in very good nick. It wasn't buckled and bent, and it really looked pretty acceptable to my eyes. Bearing in mind, I'm not one of these concourse type guys, but if a fender looks like that, it looks good enough to me. So I was really surprised to find it looking like that, but as I say, pleasantly so. Strange thing about the petrol tank ended up that it was a galvanized petrol tank. So at some stage, somebody had put a fairly good replica of a petrol tank in, but had galvanized it inside and outside. And when I opened the petrol cap, it was absolutely clean inside, which quite amazed me. The nice thing about a project like this is you have no idea what you're going to get. There was no history whatsoever that came with this car, none. So it was an absolute sort of blank page. It was just, well, there's the car, that's it. And yeah, so you find these little things the way as you go along the journey. And I was quite surprised to get the petrol tank looking, galvanized. So at this point in time, basically what I'd done is I just primed all the steel panels I put them just back on the car, just hung them over the chassis just to get the idea what it looked like. I put a little bit of elbow grease into the radiator. I think a little bit too much in places because I think I might have rubbed some of the brass plating off in some places, but be that as it may, the radiator definitely looks better. And the next step will be, in my books, is to spray all the steel bits with a K1 primer. It's like a spray filler, and sand them all down, get them all nice and smooth, and then paint them. So that lies ahead. The splash aprons and the running boards looked very grotty initially, but after they'd been sandblasted and primed, they came out pretty much acceptable to me at any rate. So that's where the situation stands at the moment as far as the bodywork and stuff goes. That's just a shot from the front just to get an idea. I haven't done anything about the wooden part of the body at this point in time. The seats seem to be okay. They obviously need to be cleaned, but there are no rips or tears or holes or anything in them. The woodwork there seems to be all sound, albeit very dirty. So I've still got to tackle that, but it's standing on drums at the moment. So these are just the seats that are all there. I found some interesting plaques when I opened the two doors. At the bottom of the door where you step in, there was quite an interesting little brass plaque there on both of the doors, interestingly. And also interesting to me was the fact that the screws were lined up all in nice lines. So being a little bit of ADH type person, it's nice to me to see all the screw lines in a line. So I was quite happy to find that. I've still got to clean these off, obviously. The woodwork itself seemed to be fairly good. I quite like the dark color that it sort of has. So the plan there is to just give it a light sanding and then probably put Woodrock product on, but not to do too much there. The panels in between are just ply. They're really thin ply. And all but one of the panels are in very good condition. So I think I'll probably do exactly the same there. Just give them a light sanding and prepare them just a little bit so they look a bit better, but try and maintain the darker color and the sort of used appearance, if I could put it that way. This is the front door. That's the only one where there's really problems. This is the outside of the door, and you can see the little panel on the right-hand side has got a sort of bit of water damage at the bottom. But that's the only panel that's damaged in the rest of the body. The inside of the door, the ply is delaminated a bit, just of the door. So I thought I'd just sort of put in a piece of ply there. And the rest of the ply in the body is fine. So I'm not planning on replacing that, certainly at this point in time at any rate. There were some finds along the way, as I said, besides the rear view mirror. One of the finds was that although the majority of the car appears to be 1915, as far as the engine numbers and so on go, some of the things are definitely not right. Hogshead being one of them, but sometimes you get there's the positive points to the negative points. So the positive point is that this particular hogshead has place for a starter motor. And after looking through the inspection on the hogshead at the back, it's got a timing gear, not a timing gear, a ring gear in there as well. So it would be simply a case of getting a starter motor and bolting it on to make it electric start should I not be able to crank it. So I was quite happy to get that. I'm not that much of a purist, so as long as the thing works, I'm happy. So, to me, if it's not supposed to have a starter motor and we put one in, it's not the end of the world as long as I can use the car. If I can't use the car just because I can't get it started, well, then it's pointless. So I wasn't that disappointed to find that it's the wrong hogshead and that it's, in fact got a ring gear inside. As far as the bonnet goes, it's the wrong bonnet also. This was a manufactured bonnet, and I found it was made out of aluminium, and it doesn't have the louvers that it's meant to have. However, I must admit I made a serious flaw when I took the stuff to the sandblasting. I took the bonnet as well. And my recommendation to you is never to take aluminium for sandblasting, because that makes your life really a lot more difficult. So unfortunately, the aluminium bonnet came back quite severely pitted from the sandblasting, and requires, or will require, a lot more sanding and spray filling to get it to be a nice smooth bonnet again. But such is life. As you go along, you find these things. The last slide that I have is that Philip and I decided, just for fun, is that we just try and see whether the engine would start just as is, with rusted plugs. I couldn't get the carburetor apart. The brass nut at the bottom was solid, so I couldn't get it apart. Couldn't clean the carburetor at all. I just literally, we put petrol into the petrol tank, just to see for fun whether anything would happen. And indeed it sort of did. So I've got a short clip here, which hopefully you can see and hear. Anyway, so to my amazement, at any rate, and I'm not sure about Philip, but to my amazement, it actually started and ran, albeit not very well. So there might be a sticky valve or a dead plug, I'm not really sure. Subsequently, I've taken the carburetor apart, and it was absolutely amazingly filthy and full of all sorts of funny things inside. So just the fact that it ran at all is an absolute miracle. The next step that I plan to do, now that I've got the steering column and controls all in, attached and in their place, is that I'm going to now start the engine shortly again. I've put the radiator in place just temporarily, and I plan to run the engine for a longer period of time and try to see whether the engine in fact runs properly and smoothly with a clean carburetor, and I'll clean the plugs off as well, and just see how well or not well the engine runs. If it runs well enough, I will probably start assembling the car. If it doesn't run well enough, well, fortunately it's all apart, so I'll just take the engine out and have to redo the engine. So I'm the eternal optimist as far as this goes. So hopefully everything will go according to plan and I won't have to redo the engine. Once I got the engine, once I'm convinced the engine is okay, I will then just, tidy up the engine, of course, start assembling the car, and then I've got to look at the, the wheels and that sort of thing. So there's a long way from being finished, but things are happening, so I'm very happy about that. So thus far, it's been a very enjoyable project, very satisfying, and hopefully it will succeed in being a nice car one of these days. So I'm hoping that will be the case. As far as the wheels go, apparently these are the incorrect wheels. It's not supposed to have demountable wheels like this. But on the positive side, these are the same wheels as I've got on my 21. So that makes I'm quite happy about it, because I can interchange the wheels and the tires. So it's not the end of the world to me, the fact that they're the incorrect ones. If I get the correct ones, I'll put them on. If I don't get the correct ones, well, at least as long as they're four wheels that are round and that work well, then I will use the ones that are on the car. As long as I can use the car and enjoy it, that's all that I'm really interested in. And that's pretty much my story. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to ask. I'll try and answer them, or I'll refer them to somebody who can answer them. For the rest, yeah, that's it. I'll have to keep you up to track with what's happening for the rest of the car, with the engine and the rest, and hopefully in the not too distant future, I'll at least have a car that looks sort of semi-acceptable. So that's it.
Baie dankie, Mike. Thank you very much.
Dis 'n plesier, Kobus.
Enige vrae? Any questions?
Mike, I'm pretty sure that's a solid brass radiator.
Yeah, I also thought it was a solid brass radiator, but I think I put a little bit too much elbow grease on the front. I think it's an aftermarket type radiator, and I kind of get the idea it might have been brass plated, because it seems to me like the copper's coming through in places where I put a little bit too much elbow grease in. So yeah, I was quite surprised that it happened. But anyway, it is what it is.
Is dit nie miskien lood wat deurslaan nie op plekke nie?
Nee, hy lyk pink soos rooikoper.
Wat het jy gebruik om skoon te maak, Mike?
Ek het 'n klomp goed gebruik, sekerlik 'n paar goed wat ek nie moes gebruik het nie. Maar onder andere so wat noem jy hierdie skierpads wat jy kry?
Ja.
Soos by 'n skottelgoed spons, jy weet die onderkant van hom. Kan nie onthou wat jy
Het jy salt and vinegar solution ook gebruik?
Ja, ek het dit ook gebruik.
Dit sal die braas pink maak. Dit sal uitpolish.
O, is dit so? O, wonderlik.
Dit vat die zink uit die braas uit en dis hoekom dit rooi word. So as jy net braas sal hy regkom. Dis hy salt and vinegar mixture wat dit doen.
O, okay. O, dis wonderlike nuus. Wel, ek hoop jy's reg. As hy maar bietjie pinkerig is dit maar net so. Dis nie die einde van die wêreld nie. Ekskuus, ek het vergeet ook om te sê dat daar was 'n klomp goed soos altyd wat missing was. En ek moet baie dankie sê aan Philip Kushka. Ek het nou 'n paar keer nou besoek afgelê by hom en 'n lensie hier gekry en 'n adjustment rod vir die radiator daar en 'n grease nipple hier en 'n bonnet handvatsel daar en so aan. So hy het nou 'n klomp van hierdie klein goedjies wat 'n ou aan die begin nou nie besef is missing nie, maar tot jy nou begin kyk en sien, o, jessie, maar daar is nie handvatsels aan die bonnet nie. En dan kom jy agter, o, okay, nou waar gaan ek hulle kry? So ek moet net baie dankie sê aan Philip wat my gehelp het met hierdie klein fiteriasies, om dit so te stel, om dit te kry, want dit is baie moeilik om dit anders te kry. Maar dit maak dit baie beter, jy weet, as jy nou een lens het wat missing is, dan lyk dit maar sleg. So gelukkig kan ek nou sê dat my liggies het nou almal lense, so ek is baie bly daaroor. Dankie Philip. Dit is wonderlike nuus ook, baie dankie. Ek hoop jy's reg.
Ek is seker, maar baie geluk, dit is 'n baie nice kar.
Dankie ook. Ek's baie opgewonde daaroor.
I also want to congratulate Mike. I think it seems to be quite a good buy, and it's in my view of seeing the car. I'm quite impressed, and also impressed at the rate at which you're progressing with the restoration, Mike.
Well, there's a bit of good news, Philip. My brother has in this week arrived from New Zealand, and he's going to be here for a month and a half. So unfortunately, if I'd known, well, I should have actually sent him to you and Philip for a sort of a crash course on how to be a Model T appy, but there's no time for that. So he sort of has to learn along the way. So it's quite exciting because now I can do things with a handlanger. So I took my front axle out of my 21T this morning because the front axle is bent. And if I had to do it by myself, it probably would have taken me 2 months before I kind of really got the inspiration to do it. But he said, no, we've got to take it out. And 1 hour later, it was all out. So I'm quite impressed. So now I need to just get the bend straightened in the front axle. And so things happen when there's more than one person involved.
Yeah, I think we just as excited as you are to get the car running, you know, so that's
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Maar jy nog enige iemand daar vrae op of aanmerkings daar vir Mike?
'n opmerking hier van my, Kobus, ek weet nie of julle my kan hoor nie, ek het 'n baie slegte opvangsie. Die kar lyk 'n bietjie anderste as toe ek hom daar in Pretoria gesien het. En Mike, ek is eintlik baie teleurgesteld want ek het 2 keer die opsie gehad om my kar te koop voor jy hom koop, want jy het gesê hoor ek het eerste opsie. So well done. Kar lyk baie mooi.
Jammer Ewald, ek het nou een keer vir die ou gesê ek gaan dit nie koop nie, want toe hy my bel was ek nou die volgende dag was ek op pad Skotland toe vir 'n maand. En ek het nou die aand toe hy my bel, toe sê ek nee, ek kan dit nie nou kar koop nie, ek is nou op pad Skotland toe. En die volgende oggend vlieg ons nou van George af Johannesburg toe, en ons het nou oude gewoonte 'n paar ure oor gehad daar by die lughawe, en ek sit by die lughawe en ek kyk na die foto's weer, toe besluit ek nee wat, ek bel die ou gou, ek sê luister, het jy al enigiemand, want hy het vir my gesê, hy het nou ander mense wat ook belangstel, bel ek hom gou, toe sê ek vir hom, luister, het jy enigiemand anders al gebel in verband met die kar? Hy sê nog nie, maar hy gaan. Ek sê, moet dit nie doen nie, ek koop die kar. So ek is baie bly dat dit so uitgewerk. Ek wou net een ding sê, Kobus, en ek het nou vergeet om wat te sê, maar ek sien Brian kyk nou ook. Ek is bietjie bekommerd, jy weet, ek is nie die kleinste ou in die wêreld nie. En ek is baie bekommerd dat die stuurwiel gaan op die einde nou hier op my bors ergens kom sit, want die stuur is nie heeltemal reg nie. So ek is nie 100% seker hoe ek nou ooit in hierdie kar gaan kom om hom te bestuur nie, want daar's baie min plek. So ek gaan nou seker maar 'n paar modifikasies moet doen om te kyk hoe ek agter die wiel gaan kom.
Mike,
Maar nou ja, ons sal maar sien langs die pad.
Jy moet nou net nie doen wat met my gebeur het nie. Toe ek my kar laat verf het, toe ek hom terugkry, toe wil ek inklim en ek sien maar magties, nou kom ek nie in nie. Ek het dan nou altyd ingekom, my maag het nie so groot geword nie, is groot, maar het nie soveel groter geword. Toe kom ek agter dat die stuurwiel ons te bo ingesit, ek kom regdraai, pas ek weer.
Ja, nee, ek hooplik. Wel, as dit net so maklike fix is dit okay, maar ek dink nie dit gaan so maklik wees vir my nie.
Just as a matter of interest, Brian, what is your opinion, or how does that car of Mike compare to yours from what you've seen?
So mine doesn't have doors, and I don't have the metal panels going to the. My windscreen comes straight up off the firewall, so I've got that very short bonnet. There's a little brass beading on the firewall where the bonnet sits on. So, and then the car doesn't have any doors. But what we did, which you might find quite interesting, is we moved the seat, the front seat, backwards to create more space. Now, I don't know how much space you have where your seat fits over the petrol tank, but we had about 100 mils in front of the petrol tank, and we no, there was a metal wall in front of the petrol tank, but the seat overhung it. So we pulled the seat back and made it flush with the metal wall where the front of the tank was, and we extended the seat backwards. So we extended the seat back about 100 mils. So we made a slightly bigger platform, and then that gives you, and we put a divider behind the petrol tank, and then that gives you nice storage space under the seat for extra tools and things like that that you that you may need to take, and that extra space has made a huge difference in the whole feel of the steering wheel setup and your feet access to the pedals. And yeah, it's made it lovely to drive. This driving
I'm going to have
position
to do
is really
something
good.
like that for sure. Absolutely.
Goed. Nog iemand ietsie? Mike, interessant, die geskiedenis agter die depohek. Jy bietjie inligting oor hoe, waar, wat kom hulle vandaan?
Nee, ek het niks inligting nie. Ek het nie my huiswerk gedoen nie. Jammer, Kobus.
Nee, ek het nou net, wat ek ken hulle self nie, toe het ek nou net so vinnig op Wikipedia gelees, en toe sien ek, hy's blykbaar nou hier beweeg ek nou op gevaarlike terrein, want hier's 'n paar kenners wat my nou vinnig gaan reghelp. Maar hy's blykbaar op die TT se chassis gebou, sê hulle. En hulle het hom gebou om taksies te word, sodat hy meer mense kan dra en ook meer bagasie. Nou, ek weet nie Philip, Rosser, Philip Kuske, die manne wat die goed ken, of dit nou die waarheid is of nie.
Wel, ek sou skat is waar, want daar is baie plek. Ek moet sê, daar is regtig baie plek in die bak. Jy weet, agter, daar is net die twee sitplekke, maar jy kan maklik 3 rye sitplekke daarin sit as jy wou. En daar's baie plek vir bagasie. Die enigste probleem is, daar's net die 2 deure. Die een vir aan die drywers, wel nie aan die drywers se kant, aan die passasier, maar voor. En dan die deur agter, maar dis 'n vreeslike klein deur. En ek sou dink dit sou miskien meer sin gemaak het om die deur agter te sit en 'n tipe van 'n opvou sitplek of so iets te doen. Ek weet nie.
Nou, die foto wat ek gesien het hulle nou gewys dat hy jy weet die deur voor en dan die klein deurtjie agter. Maar toe dat hulle daar die banksitplek was daarin. En dan nou heel agter op die bak was nou lyk vir my plek vir die bagasie, maar dis nou seker verskillende maniere wat hulle gemaak het, jy weet. Wat meer mense dra, minder bagasie ensovoorts. Maar dis is my baie interessante voertuig.
Nogal.
Dankie. Nogmaals baie dankie vir jou aanbieding. Ek waardeer dit regtig.
Dis 'n plesier. Baie dankie jy my gevra het.